Thank you for tuning in to MacroView Television, and welcome to another brand new edition here on the Taiwan Outlook, the program that presents Taiwan to the world. I'm your host, Wu Ruiguo. Before we start on today's program, let me ask our viewers around the world a simple question. How well do you think you know Taiwanese culture? And how did you come to know the Taiwanese culture? Did you learn it from books, from visits, or from friends? On today's program, we're delighted to have a very special guest from France who has been in Taiwan for over 30 years, Professor Serge Dreyer from Tunghai University. Professor.
Hello, everybody.
Yes. Well, Serge, it's a pleasure to have you here on the program. And let me start off by asking you a question. That you've been in Taiwan, what, 33, 34 years?
Yes, I arrived in 76.
And can you share with us, what would, the reasons, the motivations that prompt you to come to Taiwan in the first place, and subsequently that you decided to stay, and you stayed for over 3 decades?
Right. In fact, the first time I came to Taiwan, I didn't know anything about Taiwan, but I wanted to conduct research on Taoism and on shamanism, because my teacher has spent many years in Taiwan. So I came to study. But in fact, when I arrived in Taiwan, life changed course, and I started to study Tai Chi Chuan, which became my main passion.
All right.
And then things followed, and I just stayed.
Yeah, I had read about your biography before the program started. That I learned that you decided to come to Taiwan or learn about the Asian culture when you were back in France and growing up, and also you worked 2 years as a disc jockey, DJ, to save money.
Right.
And out of all the countries in Asia, why Taiwan though?
Well, because at that time, remember, I arrived here in 1976. It was still the period of the Gang of Four in mainland China.
Yes.
So if I wanted to study Taoism or whatever, no way to go to China. And there was another thing which really I didn't like. And I'm coming from a country where freedom is a tradition, very important. And I couldn't stand the idea to be in a communist country, having people watching over what you say, what you think all the time.
Yeah.
So Taiwan was a
natural choice.
Yeah.
Okay. And why did you decide to stay after you first came here?
Ooh, that's many reasons.
You probably met your wife at the time?
Yes, that's one of the reasons.
All right.
And I spent first 3 years here. So, Taichung was also very important.
So you stay in Taichung mostly?
No, in Taipei. I was in Taipei at that time. And also, something happened. I think it happens to all foreigners when you stay abroad for a long time. I started to change my point of view about life, my way to look at things changed. And after, let's say, 1 year and a half, 2 years, I started to understand more things about how Taiwanese people think. I had less conflict in my relationship with them. I started to fully appreciate who they are, what they're doing, how this country is going. And that started to be very, very attractive for me, and I decided to stay.
Okay. But let me ask you though, I mean, before you came to Taiwan, you must have, read some books or, hear some stories about Taiwan. But after you arrived in Taiwan, did you find Taiwan back in 1976 a little different than what you imagined?
Well, in fact, I didn't...
you didn't know much about Taiwan?
In 76, you had very, very few books about Taiwan.
Yes.
Very few books.
Very limited
available.
exposure.
Yes. And also, the only thing I knew about Taiwan was Jiang Jieshi political regime. That was his story.
Yes.
But I didn't say anything about Taiwan. I just said about the history of China.
Yes.
The only thing I knew about Taiwan was from my teacher, who was an assistant of a Taoist priest in Tainan.
Okay.
His name is Christopher Schipper. He's quite famous.
Yes.
So I just knew about the religious aspect of Taiwan, but didn't have any idea. The only thing I saw from Taiwan, I remember it's from a book, a picture of Taipei with people riding bicycles and mountain in the back. And since I love mountain, I thought, that might be an interesting place for me.
Beautiful place, yes.
That's all I knew.
Yeah, and also, as you mentioned the fact that, coming from France, that you value the freedom, as simple as air, for a lot of French people. But at the time, in 1976, Taiwan was still under martial law. Were there a lot of adjustments that you had to, make in order to, make your life here in Taiwan a little more comfortable?
It was very difficult for me.
Yes.
I'm going to tell you two stories.
Please.
When I started to practice Tai Chi Chuan in Yuanshan, in front of the Grand Hotel,
yes.
every morning there was a guy with a newspaper and a talkie-walkie and a newspaper, and he was standing next to us. And he pretended he was just looking at us practicing Tai Chi. And I had a friend who was making bad jokes about Jiang Jieshi.
Okay.
And a few weeks later, he was back to France. And so we are talking with this guy. He said, "Oh, no, I don't know anyone who is spying on you." And one day, his talkie-walkie fell on the ground.
Oh, okay.
And which
okay, that was obvious. Yes.
And I had also the opportunity to take a job to replace a teacher in Wenhua Daxue.
Okay.
And one day I forgot why. I probably made also a bad joke about martial law or Jiang Jieshi or whatever. And one student came to me at the end of the class and said, "Well, just beware, because there are people here who are going to make a report about what you say." And that, for me, was a big shock, because that was the first time I was confronted with restriction on freedom. So that's what I said at the beginning. I had at the beginning quite a lot of conflicts in the relationship with the people, because there were a number of things I couldn't stand.
Yes.
But after a while, I understood, well, what would I do if I was a Taiwanese living under martial law?
Yes.
So when I began to understand, began to become more flexible, then my life changed for the best. But it was difficult.
Yeah. But over the last 33, 34 years since you first arrived in Taiwan, there must have been a lot of changes. Okay, and we talk about, martial law is no longer there. The kinds of freedoms that we enjoy in Taiwan is, something other peoples will emulate, the kinds of freedom that we have. And what other changes have you noticed over the last 33, 34 years that you have lived here?
I mean, all the changes, what you're talking about is
tremendous.
Yes, it's huge. And unfortunately, most of Taiwanese people, even those people who were living under the martial law, tend to forget. They very often, for political reasons, tend to forget that there were no freedom before, and now they have. And they should cherish that. I'm not teaching local people, but from my own experience. Especially, I've been living in USSR, I've been living in Saudi Arabia, where no freedom, communist regime, religious regime, and so on. So for me, the change in Taiwan was absolutely extraordinary.
Yes.
And I think all the people, no matter the blue or the green, should be very proud of that.
Yes.
A lot of foreigners study that indeed, because no blood and nothing like that. And of course, all the big change for me are coming from this change of regimes, this change of status of the government. Now people are much more open-minded. They're more relaxed in their relationship with us as foreigners. I remember, all the time, whatever critics I will say, people will say, "Well, then go home if you're not happy here." Now they change. They listen. What do you have to say? And they can argue and they can discuss with you, and they have much more reference than they had before. Before they just had the propaganda of the government. Now it's radically changed, and some people are still more for Kuomintang or for Minjintang, but everybody now has his own point of view. It was not the case at that time. And also the other big change for me as a foreigner, in those days, everything foreign was always more or less bad. And there was this attitude, propaganda attitude, that everything Chinese is the best and so on. Now most people don't have this attitude. More open-minded. They're proud of themselves, and they have many reasons to be proud of themselves, but much more open-minded. It's not only black against white. It's something in between, of course.
Yes. And also the fact is that, Serge, I know you travel quite a bit still, especially during the summertime and also the winter recess at Tunghai University. How often do you go back home in France?
I go back to France twice a year.
Twice a year?
Unless I have conference in France. Like, for example, in October, I will have a conference in France. But I go back twice a year.
Yeah. How would you then compare and contrast today's Taiwan with what you see back home in France?
Well, it's difficult to compare these two countries because they are in a very different situation.
Yes, of course.
But basically, and I think I can represent most of French people who have been staying here for a long time.
Yeah.
When you go back to France, you always have the impression that nothing is changing. Mm-hmm. Of course, it's a superficial impression because you're just there 2 months or 1 month. But there is a very... how to say that, not heavy atmosphere, but you always have the impression that things you've seen 10 years ago, they're still here.
Okay.
When you come back at one summer away from Taiwan, you're just wondering where you live.
Okay.
And people are moving very fast here.
Yes.
In France, well, people first are very proud of their culture. A lot of tourists come to France, to praise Paris, and so on. So people tend to be... well, I'm the center of the world, naturally,
if
I can say that.
Yes.
And so they don't challenge themselves as much as people do here, because here we are in a very dangerous situation. We have 1,000 missiles pointed on us.
Yes.
Everybody knows. The area is changing because China is growing now, so rising. People are moving a lot for business reasons, for other reasons. They're traveling more. They're very eager to discover the world because they have been deprived for many years during the martial for traveling. When for French people it's something granted, you know, you just
it's a gift.
It's a gift.
Yes, well, good.
They don't challenge that.
Okay, we know that Dr. Serge Dreyer is an associate professor of the Cultural Studies and also French Language Department here at the Tunghai University. After we take a break, we'll come back to our program today here on the Taiwan Outlook, and we're going to ask him about his experiences teaching students in Taiwan, learning about the Taiwanese culture through avenues like food and also other aspects. We'll be back in a few minutes.